Hello, we are Arthur and Teresa Beem, and this is our new series called The Kingdom. We have several other videos before this that lay down a foundation for this one that we suggest you listen to. It kind of helps understanding a few things, but this particular one is a kickoff of a new series called The Kingdom. It'll have several different parts to it. And
it's all part of our what Adventists need to know about the Catholic Church. So this is just another section we're starting.
Yes. So this all gets started where, as an Adventist, I looked at the Bible as the beginning and the end, Genesis and Revelation. But really, Revelation is speaking not about the end, but it also has a lot of references to the beginning of the church, and so that's where we're going to start. We're going to start in actually Revelation 11, the end of chapter 11, on into chapter 12.
Because the kingdom tells about what the Catholics believe about their church, it's their self-identity. Really, we're going to be going from Genesis all the way back to Revelation through the series in much more detail. But we thought actually Revelation 12 is an extremely good way of starting it. It's the imagery, the what happened at the early church. We just thought that's a good way to, like you said, kick off the series. As this overview. Right.
And the reason we're doing that is not to do an eschatological survey of anything, but it's a lot of it is foundational to Catholicism, and it helps you understand why Catholics think the way they do, why we do the things we do, and where the church came from. So
now, the one thing while he's looking this up, I just want to make a point.
Oh, and by the way, we use the New American Standard for this particular reading. Go ahead.
So, the Catholic Church actually does not have a dogmatic way of reading Revelation. They pretty much leave it up to the individual person's interpretation. They do have guidelines that have been suggested, and they teach a lot of times in their colleges and universities. They do teach what it means, but it's been a tradition of scholars for 2,000 years who've looked at it and say, we think we know what this means, but the church has not dogmatically ruled on it except for just in a few places. And so we're going to be telling you the general idea of what Catholics, a lot of American Catholics and many scholars believe, but none of this is going to be dogma unless we just point it out. We say this particular thing is, or even doctrine. And we'll put up there what the difference between a dogma, a doctrine, and discipline, because those are all different, they have different meanings to it. So we'll try to do it someplace on the screen.
Right. So, excuse me. I'm going to read just a little bit. It's just a couple paragraphs. And remember something. When this was written, there weren't any chapters or paragraphs. It was read straight through. So it kind of changes how you look at things if you read it like that. So that's how I'm going to read it here. So I'm in chapter 11, verse 19 to start out with. And the temple of God, which is heaven, was opened, And the ark of his covenant appeared in his temple, and there were flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder and an earthquake and a great hailstorm. A great sign appeared in the heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars.
Well, I think we need to give them some background about this so that this is going to make some sense. Because one of the things that is really important to Israel at this time was that the prophet Jeremiah had predicted that the Babylonians would come in and sack the temple. And so to prevent them from getting the Ark of the Covenant, he took some men and hid the Ark of the Covenant in one of the caves, supposedly near Jerusalem. And so they sealed it up. And the men asked Jeremiah, we need to make a marker. We need to map this out so that, after the siege, we can come back and get it. And Jeremiah said, you know what? No, God told me that at the time of the Messiah, the Ark of the Covenant will be revealed. So it is not up to us. And, this was hundreds of years. I think this would be around 800 years before Christ.
Long time.
And so, so it sat there. And this is one of the things that the Israel was going to use as an indicator when the Messiah came,
right.
is the fact that they would...
When the ark showed up again.
When the ark that's right. Somebody would discover the ark. And so when Christ came, the ark had not been rediscovered. And so the early church, who were Israel, thought, okay, well, Christ had fulfilled all these things. You go through Matthew, and this Gospel of Matthew tells how Christ fulfilled all the Old Testament predictions and prophecies. Well, this one had not gotten to be fulfilled. And so when the early church read this vision of St. John, they got it. They finally understood the Ark of the Covenant was in heaven. It was a person. Because think about this. All of the old covenant symbols and shadows were fulfilled in the flesh. They were actually fulfilled. The sacrifice of the animals became, the Passover lamb became Christ. Christ was the Passover lamb. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So now St. John is telling the world that the Ark of the Covenant was just a shadow, because the Ark held the symbols of Christ. The bread, which was the manna, which was the bread of life,
right.
And the staff of Aaron, which was symbolized the priesthood, and then the covenant, the tables of the covenant, which was the law, and Christ fulfilled the law. He became the rock. And so just as the ark held the symbols of Christ, now we have Mary, who is the ark, symbolizing the ark.
Right, and if you look through all the things through the Bible, Christ never does, or the Lord never ever says anything that means one thing. So you have dual meanings for just about everything. So you have the ark, which is acacia wood, gold, have the important things in them. Nobody can touch it. Then you have Mary, that has Christ, who is he is the rod of Aaron. He is the fulfillment of the 613 commandments.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's the bread of life, which is the manna, inside Mary. So that's how Catholicism sees all of that, is her consummation of everything is happening in Mary, giving birth to God.
Right, right. And so when the early church read this, they saw the fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy. And I
Absolutely.
think, and I think another thing is just the grandness,
Right.
the lightning, the thunder,
Right.
all this just says, okay, pay attention. This is something amazing. And so there in that,
It's
the
like
ark
a bell
was
ringing, a big bell
Right.
ringing and saying, now pay attention. I'm telling you something important.
right,
And then here's the big portent in the sky.
right. And so the Ark of the Covenant was opened to the entire world, and it was this woman.
So with that in mind, I'm going to read it again and think about how Catholicism sees this. So, and the temple of God, which is in heaven, was opened, and the ark of his covenant appeared in the temple. And there were flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder and an earthquake with a great hailstorm. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was with child and cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth.
So evidently, this was the woman who was giving birth. And so just let's keep that image in mind, because it was a woman in heaven. Oh, but we should probably say something about the fact that she was standing on the moon.
Mm-hmm. So if you look back in history, remember the Israelites would read this fully. They studied astronomy. They studied signs in the sky. They believed in and lived by all of this. And people like Aristotle and many others, they looked at this and this is what they thought. They looked at the moon, and everything from the moon down to the earth was considered corruptible and earthly. Everything above the moon was considered incorruptible and heavenly. So when you see this woman with her feet on the moon, she is in the incorruptible space. You see her in the incorruptible space with the 12 stars, which Catholicism has seen as the 12 disciples, 12 tribes of Judah.
Well, and St. John wrote this revelation around 100. And by that time, he was speaking to both. He was the bishop of the 7 churches that are spoken
Right.
about in the first couple
Revelation,
chapters
yes.
of Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
And so these were actually his churches, and they had a lot of pagans that were coming into, especially because Ephesus was his main seat of his bishopric. Now, each one of these churches had their own bishops, but he was like the archbishop over all of them.